there is a Heritage H140 from the late 80s. In the middle there is a brand new Gibson Standard Classic. That's a Heritage Standard. This is the new Gibson Standard 50s neck. They also built a 60s neck. Beside that's a Heritage European Special made from the custom shop Heritage. Beside the custom shop R8 1958 reissue from Gibson, also aged. Both guitars are aged. This is the top high-end Heritage, the custom core sear, that means waxed, aged, $4,600. Beside the custom shop 1959 Gibson, $6,600, $2,000 more expensive than the Heritage. And then the 1960 reissue Gibson custom shop, and the Murphy lap aged 68. So first some history information of Gibson and then the Heritage to give you a better picture. So in the late 19th century, Orville Gibson founded his company. It was called then Mandolin and Guitar Manufactory. And then he sold his company in the early 20th century, and then Gibson moved around to different places because they always needed more space. So finally they moved in 1917 in 225 Parson Street in Kalamazoo. And they produced guitars from 1917 to 1984. And they closed down, they locked the door 30th of June in 1984, and Heritage opened the 1st April in 1985 and restarted with the same machines, the same soft tools, chisels, screwdrivers that Gibson used, the same sanding machine and cutting machines, and some leftover from the woods of Gibson. But then in 1974, Gibson opened the Tennessee plant in Nashville because they had serious problems with the unions and money problems. So they moved to a place where the wages were a bit lower than in Kalamazoo. I mean, Kalamazoo, Detroit, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Harley Davidson. That was the steel belt with all these big brands, car manufacturers. Kalamazoo is on the right side of the Michigan Lake, and Chicago is on the left side. So you can imagine where it is. So they moved down 528 miles south to Tennessee. It was cheaper to produce guitars there, and they had not these problems with the unions, with minimum wages, and. Okay. So Gibson had both plants between 1974, when the Tennessee plant opened, and 98 when they closed Kalamazoo. So for 10 years Gibson had two plants. They opened then in later in 89 in Bozeman, Montana, the acoustic guitar plant, and in Memphis for the semi-hollow guitars. But for 10 years they had both addresses where they produced guitars, but Kalamazoo didn't produce big series. They made some limited editions, they worked on acoustics, on semi-acoustics, or some custom-built guitars. So the main production of Les Pauls was anyway in Tennessee. And even then, Gibson went through quite a lot of changes. In 1944, Gibson was bought by CMI, Chicago Musical Instruments, then later by ECL, a Brazilian brewery, and they became the famous Norlineers. And then it was bought by Jaskowitz Berryman. And between 1986 and 2018, it was the Jaskowitz area. And then they also changed the name from Gibson Branding Corp to Gibson Guitar Corporation. So also the Gibson owners changed their name because they had quite often money problems, so they had to go through some changes. And then in 2018, Gibson was bought by Colbert Gravis Roberts. They brought Levi's back, so they are specialized on buying good brands, but they are a bit forgotten, and to bring them back in the limelight. But it looks at the moment that it works also for Gibson. So Gibson, if you talk of a 50s Gibson, they were made in Kalamazoo through the McCarthy area. McCarthy joined Gibson in 1948 and became the CEO in 1950, and so between 1950 and 1965, that was the golden era of Gibson, and that was the McCarthy area. He brought the Flying V on the market, the ES335, the 330, and the most famous Les Paul in 52, the standard in gold top, and then in 54 the custom in black. Heritage story is that Jim Derulo worked for Gibson, and he closed the door in Kalamazoo 225 Parson Street the 30 June 1984. And the same guy opened the doors again the 1st April of 1985. And Jim Derulo wanted to start his own guitar business, and he convinced some other guys from Gibson to join him and to open a guitar manufactory. And then they opened in the old Gibson factory. They restarted to build guitars as they are used and know to do it, with the same materials, the same tools, and they call themselves soft tool manufacturers. So the chisels, the screwdrivers, the sanding machine, the cutout machines are the same as they used for the Gibson guitars. So Derulo lamp modes, Page, Korpak, Wall, French, Bollen, and they convinced Tim Shaw, the famous Tim Shaw, who brought the famous humbuckers back to Gibson in the early 80s, the Norlin years, to join them. And so around 10 Gibson guys restarted the Heritage brand. But at the beginning they made a lot of different models and custom models, and so financially they get nowhere. And the Heritage suffered from money problems from the beginning, because they were carpenters and luthiers and used to work by hand, and not advertisement guys, not businessmen. So over all these years, the Heritage, even if they built a closer 59 Les Paul as Gibson itself, they didn't get the knowledge they deserved. So over the years they restarted to make a less wide range, and so they became famous for the H535, the S335 twin, and the H150, and they also made the H140. That's a bit the thinner Les Paul body. And the H140, H150, and the 535, and some 555 and 157, some upgraded. But the main line was the 150 and the H535, and they were always built closer to the original 50s than Gibson built the guitars themselves. And fortunately now the Heritage guitars are bought by the Kwok family at BandLab. And the Kwok family is a billionaire family from Singapore. They are the biggest palm oil traders in the world. And so finally the Heritage got now the money they deserve to show their instruments on a wider scale. And so when you go to stores, now you see beside Gibson guitars quite often also the Heritage. And why I labeled this the Heritage the Gibson killer, because I went in a shop and a young lad talked to two other young lads, oh, this is the Gibson killer, you know, Heritage. And then I saw, oh, why they say that? And then when a couple of weeks later online I saw on a platform, they said, oh, I'm selling my Heritage, the Gibson killer. I thought, oh, maybe I should make a video, because everybody's excited now about this new hype of the Heritage, and the Heritage deserves that. But for me, the Heritage is the original Gibson. It's like an illegitimate son. Imagine a king has a son from a love affair, and he's not allowed to use the prince, you know, to be the prince. And he has a second son, and that one is the prince, you know, but they look like twins. They are the same, they speak the same, they think the same. So from the DNA, the Heritage is a Gibson. But for me, they are twins. The Heritage, it's probably more the original 50s than the Gibson, but the Gibson is a more modern instrument. And the new standard Gibsons, they made them in 3 versions, the 60s with a bit hotter pickups, P90s, single coil, and the 50s, that's my favorite one because it has a bit more on the neck, it's a bit bigger neck, that's really, really comfortable. And I have to say the new Les Paul standard, that's the benchmark, where all the other similar guitars have to be measured. It's an absolute perfect instrument. You can't build better a wooden guitar like that. The electronics are perfect, the wood is fine, everything is really on top. So the Heritage as well is a great guitar. It's certainly not a Gibson killer. It's close to the Gibson, or it depends what you're looking for. Some may find that the Heritage, that's a bit more classic. It's more in the 50s. It feels more like a traditional, an older guitar, while the Gibson really feels like a modern, high-end, top high-end guitar. So it's up to you, but the Heritage is definitely not a Gibson killer. It's, for me, a twin. It's on the same level. Both guitars are great. Both guitar sounds great. Both guitar plays great. And that's it. So not a Gibson killer, but a great instrument. Certainly worth the money. The Gibson will stay the benchmark. You have to spend a bit more for a Gibson, but when you want to resell it in a couple of years, you will get your money back. And the Heritage at the moment on the second-hand market, they have a bit problems to get the money they deserve to get. Okay, so thank you for watching. Have a lovely day. Thank you. Bye.